What's up guys, and welcome to a new video. So here's my take on the Whirlwind Bleed Barbarian. I will just start off by saying when it comes to speed farming the pit for materials, this build is unmatched. I can run pretty consistently between 90 seconds and 2 minutes in a 101 pit. Now even though this is a Whirlwind build, we're only using Whirlwind to proc our tornadoes, which will be doing all of the bleed damage thanks to the berserk ripping aspect. I have completed up to tier 125 in the pit with no issues, and it could definitely push further than that. I would say at least into like the 130s. Uber Lilith and tormented bosses get absolutely melted by this build. I will cover everything in depth so that you fully understand how the build functions and works. Timestamps will be down below, so feel free to jump ahead at any time. There will be a full Lilith kill and tormented boss kill at the end of the video, so be sure to stick around if you want to check that out. Anyways, let's get right into it. Starting off with the skills used in the build, we are going to use Whirlwind. Obviously, this is going to be our bread and butter. This will be the way that we proc our tornadoes, and then you also want to set this to your two-handed mace. We will use Wrath of the Berserker for our ultimate skill. This makes it to where we go berserking, which we want to be berserking as often as possible so that we can proc our aspect of berserk ripping. You know, that's how we're doing all of our bleed damage. When we're not berserking, you know, we're not doing any bleed damage. So we definitely want to have berserking up as often as possible. This is one of the ways that we get that. We also get a lot of damage from this, movement speed and fury generation. Right here we take challenging shout. Basically you can see right there, we get maximum life, and then we get 3 fury each time that we get hit with challenging shout up, and 48% damage reduction. We take rallying cry. Basically this is going to give us movement speed, a lot of resource regeneration, and also you can see right there, you know, it makes us go unstoppable. Right here we're going to take war cry. War cry gives us a lot of damage, also gives us berserking, and then with at least 6 enemies nearby we get another 10% multiplier. And then last but not least we're going to take iron skin. This is also going to make us go unstoppable because of an aspect that we have. You know, it gives us a huge barrier and a lot of life regeneration. This helps our survivability a lot, and it's almost constantly up. So all right, as for the expertise, the one that you're going to choose to have all the time will be the expertise right here for the 10% vulnerable damage with the two-handed axe. And then, like I said, we will be using a mace. So we'll be getting this down here at all times. 15% multiplier for our critical strike damage. Obviously, that's going to boost our damage overall. And then we have a lucky hit chance, up to 10% chance to gain 5 fury when hitting an enemy, and double that while berserking. All right, now into the gear and aspects. Really quickly, as you can see, I have 4 uber uniques. You know, I have the chest armor right here, the Grandfather, Ring of Starless Skies, and the Shako. I do, you know, don't worry, for 3 of those I do have options that you can use. You don't have to have the uber unique, but I would recommend having the Grandfather for, you know, good damage with this build at very least. We'll show you my stats really quickly. You know, obviously cap off your resistances, guys. We got about 4.5k on the critical strike damage. Well, actually, let me you know, use my elixirs that I would be using like if I was running the pit. So we're at almost 4.7k critical strike damage. We have almost 500 vulnerable damage, and those are 2 stats that you definitely want to be boosting up. We'll talk more about. Really quick, you did see that I used the 2 elixirs. You want to use the precision, and you want to use the anti-venom for maximum life. These will be the ones if you're going to push the pit. You know, critical strike chance makes it overall to where we do more bleeding damage, and you know, this boosts our critical strike base chance and critical strike damage. So you know, you definitely want to use this a lot. Now if you're doing speed runs like in the 101 pit, you know, just to get materials, then you're going to use the anti-venom and the elixir of momentum. That's what I use. I mean, this just makes it to where you blast through the pit super fast. So into the helmet, obviously I'm using the Shako up here, guys. With the masterwork, you want to try to hit cooldown reduction on this. This gives us 20% damage reduction, ton of life, 4 to all skills. You know, really nice to have. Definitely want to go with the Shako. If you cannot get a Shako, then go ahead and you can either use the Tusk Helm of Joritz right here, which gives us you know, 3 to aggressive resistance, berserking damage. Don't worry about the attack speed. That, you know, doesn't do anything for Whirlwind currently. And then also you can see right there, while berserking, we can get like more enraged. We have a chance to anyways, and we get more damage, cooldown reduction, fury per second. So that can be a good option. Or you can just go with the helm like this, strength, either maximum life or like armor, like right there, cooldown reduction. And then for the tempering, go with crowd control duration, imposing presence for, you know, more maximum life. And then for the aspect up there, we're going to go with the iron blood aspect for damage reduction against bleeding enemies, which pretty much everything around us is bleeding at all times. Ultimately, you're going to want to have Tyrael's Might. This is just awesome. Gives us maximum to all resistances, to our maximum resistances, and that's huge for our survivability. Now you can see right there, I hit the damage reduction with the masterworking all 3 times. This is actually off of my necro, this Tyrael's might. I just left it there. Preferably you would want to hit maximum to all resistances though with the masterworking if you're able to. Really quickly, you know, get rubies for maximum life. Down here, get vulnerable damage. And then over here, you're going to cap your resistances with the gems. Now, if you don't have Tyrael's might or until you get it, you can go with the Rage of Hargoth right here. This is actually going to make, you see right there with the lucky hit, it's going to make it to where our cooldowns just, they go down like pretty much immediately. Gives us damage reduction against bleeding enemies, you know, really good to have. And then if you masterwork this on the damage reduction, you'll get a ton of damage reduction out of it as well. For the gloves right here, guys, you know, don't worry about the attack speed. I would prefer to have vulnerable damage right there, or critical strike damage, or strength. These are just gloves that I had from another build, so I threw them on. When it comes to this gear piece, don't worry about the attack speed. It doesn't help Whirlwind at all. But one of the reasons I use this pair of gloves though is because I had the greater affix on the critical strike chance. Now with this build, critical strike base crit chance is really important. As you can see right here, I'll just show you really quickly. We're going to be using Gushing Wounds right here as our key passive, right? And with Gushing Wounds, you can see right there, when causing an enemy to bleed, you have an equal chance to your critical strike chance to increase the bleed amount by 140% multiplicative of your critical strike damage. So this passive right here is why you'll see in a second, stack so much crit damage. And that's the reason we want as much base crit chance as we can get. You can see right there, you know, you have a chance equal to your critical strike chance to increase your bleeding damage by a huge amount. We have, I want to say, let's see, with the potion up, we have 68.8%. And then in the Paragon board, I'm also getting another 5% from a glyph against bleeding enemies. So, you know, basically we have almost, you know, 74% base crit chance, which is pretty good. And then actually I could squeeze even like another 2% out right here on the amulet if I had a better roll. So basically we could have, without any greater affix crit strike chances other than on my gloves, that's the only one that I have, I could have almost 75% crit chance. If you had a greater affix, you know, like say right here on your rings or wherever else, you could be boosting your crit chance up even more. But you want to get your crit chance up with this build as much as possible. Right there you can see I have the roll to resistance to all elements. Now that's the only resistance roll that I have on the build. You can get that right there, or you can get it down here on your boots. You'll see in just a second. Or right there you could have like vulnerable damage. We also want to stack vulnerable damage with this build. You'll see when we get into the Paragon board. For the temperings on the gloves right here, guys, you want to have damage while berserking and crowd control duration. And then go with the aspect of elements right here on your gloves. Right here into the pants. Now you want to go with strength, maximum life, total armor, and then instead of barrier generation, you want to get, like we had right here, you want to get crowd control duration. And then you want to get the imposing presence down there. Definitely want to have that. That's going to boost your life by quite a bit. You want to try to hit that with the masterwork as well. And then for the aspect right here, we're going to go with the Iron Warrior aspect. You can see right there, Iron Skin grants unstoppable and 35% damage reduction. So that's why we use Iron Skin. I mean, it's just boosting our defenses like crazy. So you definitely want to have that aspect right there. Into the boots now, you want to get strength. I would say get the greater affix of movement speed. Get the crowd control duration and movement speed for the temperings right there. Right there you see that I have total armor. I can completely drop that roll of total armor. I just don't have any materials to do it right now. You want to get either ranks to brawling skills or to Warcry. With ranks into Warcry, as you can see right here, with ranks into Warcry, you can see right here, you're going to get more multiplicative damage for each rank that it goes up. So on your boots, in the place where I have armor right there, don't worry about that. You're going to want to get ranks to either Warcry or your brawling skills, because the Warcry is a brawling skill. And then for the temperings, like we said, crowd control duration, movement speed. Right here for the aspect on your boot, you're going to want to go with the Relentless Berserker aspect. With this build, we want to keep berserking up as often as possible. We do not do any bleed damage, aka our main damage, without berserking being up. So this is a need be aspect right here. Damaging an enemy with a core skill has up to a 30% chance to extend the duration of berserking by 2 seconds. Double this if it was a critical strike. So this is what's going to keep our berserking up while we're flying pack to pack, you know, when we're using our war cries or our ultimate skill. All right, down here, guys, into our two-handed mace. Now, this is going to be the weapon that we use for our actual whirlwind. We're going to get the most damage out of this. Really quickly, though, you see right there, we want to get strength, fury on kill, and critical strike damage. Definitely want to have those 3. And then very important on the mace right here, the chance for Dust Devils to cast twice. You want to get the highest roll you can on that, and you want to try to hit that with your Masterworks. You want to get that as close to 100% as possible. And then down there for the second tempering, you want to get the critical strike damage. Now, you cannot get the critical strike damage using a Barbarian. You have to make a rogue level it at least enough to get the tempering manuals for the critical strike damage. And then you put the piece of gear on the rogue, temper, critical strike damage, and then bring it back over to your barb and, finish it off. But yeah, you're going to have to make a rogue if you want to get that critical strike damage. Down here for the aspect, now, this is what, this is like the glue to the build right here, the aspect of Berserk Ripping. This is what holds it all together. This is what makes it to where we actually do pretty much any damage. Whenever you deal direct damage while berserking, inflicts 60% of the base damage dealt as additional bleeding damage over 5 seconds. This is the bread and the butter to the build. This is how we make enemies bleed. So it says while berserking right there. This is why we want to keep berserking up as often as possible. Into our first sword, and you guys do want to go with the swords right here, so we get the implicit of critical strike damage. You want to get, on both swords, you want to get strength, maximum life, and vulnerable damage. And then on both swords, you want to get the same temperings. You'll see I have the same temperings on both swords. Dust Devil size and critical strike damage. Really important on the first one over here. You want to go with the devilish aspect. This is going to be one of our first ways that we make Dust Devils. After generating 100 fury, your next direct damage creates 2 Dust Devils. When it comes to the masterworking, I would say once you have your Dust Devil size up to 100%, which with this one and the aspect on this one down there on the bottom, we get 19% size. We're hitting the 100%. So I would say after getting Dust Devil size up, you want to hit the critical strike damage with your masterworking. On your second sword right here, guys, you're going to go with strength, maximum life, vulnerable damage. Once again, Dust Devil size, critical strike damage for the tempering. And then right here, we're going to use the Fierce Winds aspect. Your shout skills create 3 Dust Devils that deal 3,000 damage to enemies along their path. Your Dust Devils are, I have a lower roll, but it could be up to 20% bigger and deal 1% multiplicative increased damage for each 1% of their size. And we can go up to 100% with that. So definitely want to have that aspect down here. Up into the amulet, you want to try to get ranks to heavy-handed on your amulet, guys. That's kind of important. Overall, it's going to give us a lot of damage. You go with the critical strike chance. This is just the amulet that I have. I wouldn't go with lucky hit chance, even though it does help us out because Whirlwind has a low base lucky hit chance. Right there, I would say get pretty much anything else though. Maximum life, cooldown reduction preferably would be nice in place of that lucky hit chance. You definitely want to have the crit strike chance though in the heavy-handed. For your tempering, Warcry cooldown reduction and critical strike damage. And then you obviously want to try and hit the heavy-handed when it comes to masterworking. For your aspect up here, you're going to go with the Dust Devil's aspect. You definitely want to have that on your amulet, so you're getting a boost to its power by 50%. Whirlwind leaves behind Dust Devils that deal 7,200 damage to enemies in their path. This is how Whirlwind is creating just a ton of, Dust Devils itself. So it's really awesome. Down into the first ring right here, we're going to go with the Bull Chieftain aspect. We want this aspect obviously to basically have more cooldown on our shouts. We want those to be up as often as possible. And then right there, you want to have critical strike chance, vulnerable damage. And now really important, because of one of our glyphs, we do have, vulnerable for 3 seconds on hit when it comes to enemies. But that's only once every 20 seconds. So like on bosses or enemies that take longer than 3 seconds to kill, we're going to lose the vulnerable. And we want to keep vulnerable up. That's a huge damage boost, right? So, right, you want at least one roll of lucky hit up to a % chance to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. That right there alone is plenty. That's going to keep all enemies vulnerable around us at all times. You're going to want to get Warcry cooldown reduction for the tempering and damage while berserking right there. On both rings, what you want to try to do with the masterworking is hit that critical strike chance as much as you possibly can. That's really important. Right here, Ring of the Starless Skies. Now really quickly, if you don't have Ring of the Starless Skies, you're going to want to go with a ring like this. Instead of the maximum life right there, you want to have crit chance. Try to hit that with the masterworking. And then you'll go with the same temperings like right here. Warcry cooldown reduction and damage while berserking. And then for the aspect on here, you're going to want the aspect that I have on it. The aspect of Inner Calm. Be a nice multiplier for you. But if you do have the Ring of Starless Skies, which will also be a nice damage boost, you want to try to masterwork up the crit chance like we talked about before. And then, it's a 50% multiplier. Just awesome for the build overall. And then down here, the Grandfather, this is going to boost your damage greatly. Basically because you see right there, increase your critical strike damage by 100% multiplicative. And that's just massive. It takes all your crit damage and multiplies it and just makes it to where you're doing, just a load of crit damage. So definitely want to have the Grandfather. I wouldn't recommend the build without at least that. You can do without the other uniques. We have options down here like we talked about. Definitely you want to have the Grandfather. That's going to be kind of like a need be, I would say anyways, when it comes to this build. All right, we'll quickly run through the skill tree. Up top, just take whatever, 2 points so you can get down further. Right here, we're going to put 1 into Whirlwind and go back to Enhanced Whirlwind. We're only putting 1 point because Whirlwind is not actually dealing the damage like we talked about. It's the aspect of Berserk Ripping and the base bleed damage that we have from the tornadoes that is doing all the damage. So we only need 1 point there and then run it back right here. 3 into pressure points. This is more lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable, along with our ring. So we're constantly making all enemies vulnerable. Down here, guys, we're going to go 1 into iron skin, into enhanced, and to tactical to get life whenever we use iron skin. You're going to want to get 3 into imposing presence right here, and then we have ranks on our gear. 42% multiplier to our maximum life. Massive. Right here, rallying cry, run it back to tactical. And, you know, rallying cry, when you first go into a map or into a pit or whatever, you know, when you hit your rallying cry, this is going to be essentially how you get your fury started off. Unless you're actually getting hit by enemies, which you'll see in a second will give us fury too. But, you know, you hit this and it'll start your fury off, and then you'll have unlimited fury from there. Right here, challenging shout, run it back to tactical. Right here, you can see 3 fury each time you take damage. So that's another way that we get fury. Into our brawling skills right here, guys. War cry, we're going to run this back to power war cry, just giving us a ton of damage overall. This is one of our 2 ways that we get berserking, and you know, you obviously definitely want to have this. 3 into booming voice for our shout skills duration. 3 into guttural yell, making enemies that are affected by our shouts do less damage. 3 into aggressive resistance, damage reduction while berserking. And then right here I have swiftness, 12% movement speed. You know, you want to be just blasting through everything, so I would say definitely put 3 points right there. Pure Pit Fighter, increased damage to close and distant damage reduction. Slaying Strike, a multiplier against injured enemies. This is huge. You can definitely see it in the higher tier pits against like the bosses when this kicks in. Right here, 1 into hamstring, so we can get back to cut to the bone, increasing our bleed damage. Right here, thick skin, down to counter-offensive. Down to our ultimate, like we talked about earlier, Wrath of Berserker. You know, we get berserking, a ton of damage. You know, movement speed, resource generation. You know, definitely want to go with that. And then we're going to go 3 into heavy-handed, and then we have ranks on our amulet like we talked about. Basically right here, while using a 2-handed weapon, you deal 40% multiplicative increased critical strike damage. So this is another way that it's boosting our crit strike damage up to like 4,700 where it's at right now. And then 3 into wall up your skills using bludgeoning weapons, deal 15% increased damage if the enemy is vulnerable or stunned. Down into our key passive, we're going to go ahead and take gushing wounds like we talked about. This is one of the key factors in the build. Because of this, we want to get our base crit chance up as high as possible and our critical strike damage up as high as possible. So we're just doing crazy bleeds on the enemies. All right, we will quickly go over the Paragon board really quickly. There will be a link down below in the description to this build over on Mobilytics if you want to check it out that way. Guys, don't forget to get your glyphs level up to at least 15 for the bigger radius, 21 so you can get the most out of it. In the starter board right here, we're going to get tenacity for maximum life and armor. Right here, we're going to throw in wrath. Skills that critically strike, generate fury, and then this gives us a ton of critical strike damage. Right here, we're going to take raw power. The next board that we will come into is going to be the Warbringer board. This is what's going to make it to where we're keeping our fortify up pretty much constantly, and we get a lot of damage reduction from that. Right here, we're going to put ire, just get the 40 out of 40 strength. While berserking, you take 10% reduced damage from elites, and also this gets our damage while berserking, which you'll see in a minute because of a node, is going to boost multiplicatively our damage overall. Up here, we're going to get Hungering Fury. We get maximum Fury and Fury on kill. The next board that we're going to go into is going to be the Blood Rage board. Now, this is what we were talking about. This is why we get our damage while berserking. You can get up to 30% multiplier. I'm missing 1% right here. I need to bump one of those rolls up just a little bit. But you want to stack your damage while berserking because it's going to overall stack your damage in the long run up to a 30% multiplier. Right here, we're going to throw Martial. After casting a shout skill, the active cooldown of every other non-shout skill is reduced by 2 seconds. This is part of the reason, it brings down our ultimate cooldown and also our iron skin cooldown. Right here, we're going to get Grit. We're going to go ahead and take Revel right here. Next board we're going to come into is going to be the Decimator board. We get a multiplier. Right here, we're going to put the Blood Feeder glyph. The reason that I use this, we get damage to bleeding enemies, which is going to affect our bleeds, right? We get damage from that. And then you might ask why I'm not using the Twister glyph. First of all, the multiplier that you get from the additional bonus is bugged. It's not working. Secondly, the reason that I use this, though, is you have 5% increased critical strike chance against bleeding enemies. And because of our gushing wounds, we want to have our base crit chance up as high as possible, like we talked about. So that's the reason that we take that right here, guys. So we're going to come up into the Carnage board. We're going to run over this way. We're going to grab damage while berserking and berserking duration. We want to get the berserking duration anywhere that we can, because obviously without, when we're not berserking, we're not doing damage. So we need to have our berserking up as often as possible, like we talked about. Get the Might glyph right here for a multiplier, 8% while using a 2-handed weapon. We're going to take Brash and we're going to take Fierce. Get this all in here for damage while berserking. The next board that we will come into is going to be the Bonebreaker board. Run up here for 8% maximum life and total armor. Right here, we're going to throw in the Exploit glyph. Now this is going to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds on hit, but it only lasts once every 20 seconds. So that's why we have the lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable on our ring as well. And then also in our skill tree like we talked about. And this is also getting us vulnerable damage right here. I'm down here for vigor, damage reduction while healthy. And then the final board that we're going to come into, guys, will be the hemorrhage board. Now, this is part of the reason that we want to stack vulnerable damage. You can see right there, your bleeding damage is increased by 15% multiplicative of your vulnerable damage bonus. So if you were wondering why, that's why we want to stack up the vulnerable damage, overall making us do more bleed damage. So hopefully this guide has been helpful. If you have any questions or comments, anything that you would change, let me know down below. I'm definitely open to other opinions. I gotta say, this build is just really fun. Love it to death. Always love Barbarian, and spin to win is awesome. And the way that you can just speed farm the pit with this build is great. Right now at the end, guys, there will be tormented boss and Lilith full kill gameplay if you want to check that out. Anyways though, thanks for watching.